For all your TCG needs, make sure to check out alphatradingcardgames.com. What's poppin', everybody? It's Bro54. Today, I'm gonna tell you guys the story of how the Duel Masters TCG failed in the West. And when I say the West, I pretty much mean North America because it barely made an impact in America, so support in Europe was pretty much almost non-existent. So we're gonna go back in the mid-2000s because that's an important time to acknowledge, first and foremost. Now, in the mid-2000s, TCGs weren't as big of a deal as they are right now. They were a lot more niche. You could say they're still niche today. Not everybody plays TCG, but even more so back in the day. You pretty much had the big dogs. Magic the Gathering, the original TCG, and the TCG that was pretty much for the adults, you could say. If you were an adult, you wanted to play a TCG, that was the one you were supposed to play, and it had a little bit more respect than Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Then you had Pokemon, which had a lot of momentum and the backing of the Pokemon franchise in general. So that's why it became a big hit in the first place. And then it sort of died down. And then the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG, that was a TCG based on an anime and a manga that was on the TCG, based on the TCG, that became the biggest hit, got a bunch of Guinness records, and was pretty much the king of TCGs. And that was the TCG that the money guys with suits, investors would see and think, is there actually money to be made from TCGs, or is it just a Yu-Gi-Oh thing? Yu-Gi-Oh, it was a franchise. The TCG was at the center of everything. Unlike Pokemon, like you were not going to have a Yu-Gi-Oh anime, you were not going to have a Yu-Gi-Oh toys and other products if you don't have the TCG. It was front and center. So in that period, if you were going to compete with the big dogs, you definitely had to stand out. It wasn't like today where Bandai has a bunch of TCGs it throws out every day. Got the Dragon Ball, Digimon, not One Piece. Who knows what else they're going to do next. It was a really niche time for the TCGs. And to be honest, outside of Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon was a lot smaller. Magic the Gathering, I can't speak on that too much, but I would imagine it wasn't bigger than Yu-Gi-Oh! Maybe it was bigger than Pokemon, you could say, or maybe they were neck and neck, but TCGs were definitely niche. Unfortunately, Duel Masters had a big problem from its inception if we're going to be talking about standing out from the other TCGs, because pretty much everybody thought it was a Yu-Gi-Oh ripoff. And if you didn't really look into it, on the surface, it did really appear as a Yu-Gi-Oh ripoff. It's kind of ironic because Yu-Gi-Oh, the TCG, was inspired by Magic the Gathering. Kazuki Takahashi, God rest his soul, he was making a manga with Yu-Gi-Oh! It wasn't about a TCG, it was about all sorts of tabletop games, and he parodied Magic the Gathering, it became a huge hit, and then became the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG as we know it. So it's kind of ironic that Duel Masters, a TCG that's more closely based on Magic the Gathering, I believe it's one of the same creators too. Duel Masters was almost like a child's version, the kid version of Magic the Gathering, you could say. A lot of similarities with the rules and how the TCG plays, yet because people didn't really know about the history and the internet wasn't as big as it is today, it was Duel Masters that was looked at as the ripoff from Yu-Gi-Oh, which was basically kind of a ripoff from Magic the Gathering if you think about it. So that was a really big disadvantage. And I suppose before I go any further, I should mention the official reason of why Duel Masters got cancelled in the West. If you look up the official statements, you'll find out it was basically because of money. It wasn't making enough sales, and then Wizards of the Coast had to drop it in the end. And being destroyed by Yu-Gi-Oh! And compared to Yu-Gi-Oh! Was a big part of that. Yu-Gi-Oh! Was all hype back in those days. It was pretty much considered like the next Pokemon. Rivaling Pokemon as a franchise, not just as a TCG. The anime was big. It pretty much just blew Duel Masters out of the water. Speaking of anime, that's another big reason why the Duel Masters TCG failed, because it didn't really have any strong media to back it. In terms of anime, there was a Duel Masters anime, but when they brought it and dubbed it in English, the company that dubbed it, I don't remember who it is, but they decided they wanted to do a parody sort of dub. It's almost like the original abridged anime series, you could say, the Duel Masters English dub. I've seen some of it. They didn't even dub all the episodes because the TCG failed, basically. But it's most definitely hilarious in a good and a bad way. Some of the jokes and stuff are pretty cool, but they pretty much ruined the show in terms of anybody taking it seriously as an anime. In English, at least. On the other hand, as I mentioned, Yu-Gi-Oh was a big hit. I mean, 4Kids, say what you will about them. It's true, they censored the fuck out of Yu-Gi-Oh! They ruined One Piece when they were the ones dubbing that, but it was a quality dub, Yu-Gi-Oh! Good acting, professional. It wasn't a parody dub like with Duel Masters. And then the last nail in the coffin are the games too. Besides not having a strong anime to back it, it basically had no games as well. For English Duel Masters games, there's only 4, I believe, and 2 of them are shit, complete shit, and the other 2 are kind of solid. Kaijudo Showdown, I consider it a decent little Duel Masters game with the first 4 sets, and then you got the one that people are gonna say is the better one because it has more cards and maybe better graphics and stuff. The Shadow of the Code, and that's pretty much it. Senpai Legends was absolute shit. The PlayStation game was also fucking shit. And that was it. Now you compare that with Yu-Gi-Oh! And even if you didn't really play the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG in real life, some of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Games from back in the day are actually extremely solid as video games. The one I'd say that stands out the most from that era is the GX Duel Academy one from the Game Boy Advance. Excellent Yu-Gi-Oh game in terms that it does more than just the TCG. There's great music in that game. There's some story. There's some other little quests and stuff with the characters. So if you weren't into the Yu-Gi-Oh TCG and you were going to get into that through a game like that, you were in a good spot. Duel Masters did not have any kind of game in that caliber. And then the last reason I'd give is that I believe Wizards of the Coast didn't really have the ambition to make it work. If there was their only TCG, then they probably would have pulled all the stops before going bankrupt or something. But because Wizards of the Coast, their main thing was Magic the Gathering, Duel Masters was just another thing they were trying out, seeing if they could steal or build something out of the hype of Yu-Gi-Oh! But unsurprisingly, it didn't happen. The thing is that the Duel Masters TCG, even though it didn't have a lot of players in America, I know that when there was a cancellation, when they announced they were going to cancel the game, there was petitions and stuff. The Duel Masters fans, they wanted the game to go on. It did have some players that really enjoyed the game, including me. I mean, I'm not from America. I'm not going to go into the story of how I got into it in Europe. But in terms of support in Europe, it basically had anything. I don't remember ever seeing booster packs and products in stores and stuff. You would only see Yu-Gi-Oh! And even Pokemon was actually kind of sparse, if I gotta be honest with you. Yu-Gi-Oh! Pretty much ruled everything. It was the only TCG we would see, at least in my country. Definitely a different story in Japan though. Now, I could be mistaken. This information may not be accurate at all, but I do remember seeing a video that Duel Masters, it might still be the case. I don't think so, but you never know. But for a number of years, it was actually the top TCG in Japan, like surpassing even Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon. And if you do some research, you will see that Duel Masters, it has a lot more animes, a lot more sets that came out, and it basically just continued in Japan. It only failed in America / the West. But anyways, these are the reasons why I think it ultimately did fail. I mean, like I've said, if you look at the official reasons, it was because of money. But if you were going to ask yourself, okay, why didn't have good sales? It's ultimately the reasons that I've mentioned. I think they have a lot of validity to them. The comparisons with Yu-Gi-Oh! Not enough reputation that it was ripping off, didn't have anything else to back it like a good anime or good games, and Wizards of the Coast weren't going to give a fuck about it as much as Magic the Gathering, naturally. Anyways guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Tell me what you guys think in the comments. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, share this video with your friends, and I'll see you guys next time. What